road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, you just remember what your old pal said, son, you've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me.
Please sing along with the First Unitarian Church of Baltimore. Our hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rains you fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first you fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden's the plain. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
The bell and the robins call us together in covenant to awaken in our hearts understanding, love, and acceptance, that we may grow into who we are. Today, let us especially remember our covenant to affirm and promote the third principle, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. Good morning. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation at White Plains, New York, formerly Lenape Territory. I'm the Reverend Meredith Garmon, minister.
And I'm the Reverend Laura Kim Joyner, a community minister affiliated with this congregation, and we're coming to you from to the congregation from the parsonage of the congregation.
Welcome to this home of liberal religion, which affirms four truths.
It's a blessing that you were born. It matters what you do. Your experience of the divine is true, and you don't have to go it alone.
Today is the third Sunday of summer. The summer days are long, but they have begun to shrink. Daylight today will be 1 minute, 13 seconds less than yesterday. The moon was new Friday night and is now waxing crescent.
A very special welcome to our visitors. And if this is your first time here, introduce yourself in the chat. You'll find a link to the order of service on our website, which is CUUCWP.org. Then you'll also find other resources to help us connect and a donate button. For July and August, our Share the Plate funds go to Furniture Share House, who collect new and gently used furniture to give to those Westchester families in need. We'll also be able to take contributions via the donate button on your pledge for the plate share and for the minister's discretionary fund.
And now, Board Chair Joe Majak has some news and will then lead us in lighting our chalice.
Hi, I'm Joe Majak. As the chair of the board of this congregation, I welcome you. This morning, I want to remind us all of the second part of our three-part mission statement. We covenant to foster compassion and understanding within and beyond our community. Compassion literally means to suffer together. Among emotion researchers, it is defined as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to relieve that suffering. We have plenty of examples of how CUUC's members and volunteers deliver on that promise. Committee work, social justice teams, journey groups, and individual acts of kindness and generosity every day. We face new challenges and experiences every day, some of them uncomfortable. We have choices for how we respond. Our mission statement calls us to pause and try to better understand what we can do to be part of the solution, even if it's a small act of kindness and caring. And now it's time to light the chalice. On the third Sunday of the season, we dedicate our chalice to the third principle of our faith, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, just like the mission statement. Please join with me in the chalice lighting words from Leslie Paul Casbah. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom, we strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home.
The first Unitarian Church in England, we have seen, was begun in 1774, 200 years after the first Unitarian churches had begun in Transylvania and in Poland. Theophilus Lindsay in London started the first one, and by 1790 there were two, the second in Birmingham, started by Joseph Priestley. A few years later, 1794, Priestley sailed to Philadelphia. From there, he moved on to settle in what was then the wilderness backwoods of Northumberland County, Pennsylvania. Before that move, while in Philadelphia, he gave a series of sermons. 20 of Philadelphia's intellectual leaders, inspired by those sermons and directed and encouraged by Priestley, then formed the First Unitarian Society of Philadelphia in 1796, June 12. The first congregation in the country to name itself Unitarian. So, Joseph Priestley was a founder of Unitarianism in both England and America. Who was he? Priestley was a chemist, a natural philosopher, a theologian, grammarian, and political theorist who published over 150 works. He was quite the polymath, reminiscent of our earlier founding figure, Miguel Cerveto. Priestley stands as one of the outstanding embodiments of the Enlightenment, that cultural movement blending philosophy, science, and reason. At age 16, Priestley had become seriously ill and believed he was dying. Raised as a devout Calvinist, he believed a conversion experience was necessary for salvation, but doubted he had had one. This emotional distress led him to question his theological upbringing, to reject Calvin's doctrine of election, and to accept universal salvation. We could say he was a Universalist before he was a Unitarian. More about the life of Joseph Priestley in our next thrilling episode. Our spoken invocation is from David Lemon, who has some questions about which some of us might be agnostic, following which, please join in with our sung invocation. 20 Questions by David Lemon. Why did the moth fly into the flame? Was it for the same reason that Achilles died young? Who gets more fun out of sex, the man or the woman? Be sure to explain how you can tell. Which is more real to you, heaven or hell? Why do sinners' ways prosper? What causes the death of love, the love of death? Did Adam and Eve have a choice? Did the Virgin Mary? What are we afraid of anyway? Even agnostics have the right to say, thank God, don't they? Looking at these dancing atoms, shall I say I saw a ring of pure and endless light? Or did I dream the whole thing? Whom shall I say is calling? Are you in if it's your wife? Are you willing to relocate? Do you like your life? What makes this night different from all other nights? Would you say it's your fate to be always without exception 5 minutes late? If you arrived at 9:10, would the ceremony have started at 9:05, though it had been scheduled for 9:15? As you walk down the aisle and the others rivet their attention to you, do you ask yourself what you're going to do? As though it mattered? As if you knew? Please now join in singing our sung invocation, We Would Be One.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community.
The mission of the Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation is the covenant of this congregation. Would all the members and the visitors that would like affirm it along with me? We covenant to nurture each other in our spiritual journeys, foster compassion and understanding within and beyond our community, and engage in service to transform ourselves and our world.
In the quiet, misty morning, when the moon has gone to bed, and the sparrows stop their singing, and the sky is clear and red, when the summer ceased its gleaming, when the corn is past its prime, when adventure's lost its meaning, I'll be homeward bound in time. Bind me not to the pasture, chain me not to the plow. Set me free to find my calling, and I'll return to you somehow. If you find it's me you're missing, if you're hoping you'll return to your thoughts, I'll soon be listening. In the road I'll stop and turn, then the wind will set me racing as my journey nears its end, and the path I'll be retracing when I'm homeward bound again. Bind me not to the pasture, chain me not to the plow. Set me free to find my calling, and I'll return to you somehow. In the quiet, misty morning, when the moon has gone to bed, when the sparrows stopped their singing, I'll be homeward bound again.
Hello, my name is Scott Damashek, and I'm going to talk to you about Furniture Share House, this month's Plate Share. Furniture Share House provides free furniture to economically disadvantaged individuals and families living in Westchester County, giving them the basic household furnitures that enable them to rebuild their lives with dignity. What Furniture Share House does is they work with different social agencies that, such as veterans, young adults aging out of foster care, victims of fires, those struggling with mental illness, and many other agencies. Together with their case manager, they come to Furniture Share House and pick out furniture for their new apartment. This is totally free to the clients. What I'm asking you to do is donate to this cause. I appreciate your support. Thank you.
In prayer, we take time to solemnly remind ourselves of our purposes and our gratitude, that they may guide and affirm our actions and our being. Will you then pray with me? Dear earth and waters, air and sky, we know that love is an interpretation of experience, a meaning that we understand some acts to express. We may choose to interpret you, earth, waters, air, and sky, as extravagantly pouring out your love upon us. Let us take a moment to step into that interpretive mode. Let us understand the reality around us as drenching and anointing all of creation. Let us imagine that out of love for us, the universe provided us a home and brought forth astounding beauty. Earth and waters, air and sky, standing, sitting, rolling, or lying in the midst of your vast love, we pray in gratitude. Let us, for our part, love you, dear planet, in return for your love for us. Let us, for our part, love our fellow creatures, our fellow vertebrates, our fellow mammals, our fellow primates, our fellow humans, our neighbors. A possible new species of humans made the news in the last couple of weeks called Homo longi, the dragon human. Not an ancestor of Homo sapiens, but a cousin species that lived at the same time as our ancestors around 150,000 years ago. Scientists have not reached consensus on whether the discovered skull represents a unique human species or is a Denisovan. But what is increasingly clear is that the Earth brought forth at least a handful of human species who at one time shared the planet with our sapiens ancestors. There's a story there about who we are and the legacy we inherit. Do we say we are competitors who outcompeted the other Homo species? Do we say we are cooperators, that our unusually hyper-social nature allowed our species to cooperate to survive? Probably we cooperated at competing. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? The evidence of science opens us to profound wonder. In this mood of wonder and prayer, we turn to the world of today. And our hearts go out to the victims and families of the collapse of Champlain Towers South in Surfside, Florida. 17 days after the disaster, 129 people are either confirmed dead or unaccounted for. We share the shock and fears of the people of Haiti after Wednesday's assassination of President Jovenel Moïse threw an already turbulent nation into chaos. Our hearts cry out for an end to this pandemic. New cases of COVID-19 were up 15% in the US this week over the week before. Deaths continue to decline, but for how long in the face of rising cases? We ask of ourselves the mindful intention to delight in what is good, to confront what is cruel, to heal what is broken. Find any. And so, with that, I will invite us to share a moment of silence in which we hold what has been spoken and what we are carrying quietly in our hearts.
calling all you hungry hearts, everywhere through endless time. You who wander, you who thirst, I offer you this heart of mine. Calling all you hungry spirits, all the lost and the left behind. All I can, I'll share with you. Your joy and your sorrow, I make it mine.
For this summer, I suggest some worth a try spiritual practices. This week, creating a home altar. UU minister Reverend Johanna Nichols writes, "The presence of my personal home altar connects me to the sacredness of life. The sacred objects on my altar call forth the sacred in me that connects with the sacred in nature and with the sacred in worship. It beckons me to pause, to reflect, and to regain my sense of balance and wholeness. Whether we do so intentionally or not, each of us creates an environment in our home that nurtures us through our senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and scent. An altar can nurture you through your senses, add meaning and beauty to your life, and remind you that the holy is present wherever we call home. Your home altar should reflect your personal spiritual story. It doesn't matter whether it consists of a candle, a bell, and a statue of Buddha, or a piece of cloth with a glass bowl and a photo on linen crocheted by your grandmother. It doesn't matter if you pay attention to the four directions or just gather your own precious objects and mementos. What is important is who you are in the presence of your personal altar. For there, you have created a place where you are invited to recognize the sacredness of life, where you are invited to wake up and be whole.
For our next hymn, please sing along with the First Unitarian Church of Chicago, our hymn number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close? Songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost core, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice from far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon bar, my thoughts to them are winging. When friends my shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
The atheist says, I don't believe in God. Okay, but if the question is, what is your religion? Replying, I'm an atheist doesn't answer the question. Around here, it's fine not to believe in God, but what's your religion? What's your faith? What's your spirituality? I guess atheist is a partial answer in the same way that it would be a partial answer if I ask you your favorite baseball team and you say, not the Yankees. Well, that narrows it down a little. To say atheist is to identify one thing you don't believe. But whether or not any entity that you would call God is real is not the only religious question. It's not even a very important religious question. What do you do to cultivate in yourself the qualities that you most want to have, to be the person you want to be? What do you practice to help you develop the spiritual virtues, inner peace, equanimity, compassion, loving kindness, joy, intuitive wisdom? What groups do you join with, or would you consider joining with in spiritual community to foster together those spiritual virtues? What rituals does that group perform to strengthen the communion, the communal connection of its members? What other ethics and values do you adhere to as supportive of your path toward the cultivation of those spiritual virtues? What spiritual teachings do you study? What experiences of transcendence or oneness or interconnection or wholeness have you had that have lingering effects on your interest in the spiritual virtues? When Jesus in Matthew gives instruction on how to identify false prophets, he says, by their fruits ye shall know them. James Luther Adams, the great 20th century Unitarian theologian, emphasized community formation and said, rather, by their groups ye shall know them. So, what are the fruits of your approach to spiritual development, and what are your groups? Saying, I'm an atheist doesn't answer any of these questions. For that matter, saying I'm a theist doesn't answer any of those questions either. What about being agnostic? Agnostic tends to be a popular position among Unitarian Universalists. It comes from the Proto-Indo-European root gno, G-N-O, from which we get our word know, K-N-O-W, plus a prefix meaning not. The word agnostic was coined by T.H. Huxley in 1869 from gnostos, meaning known, plus a, meaning not. Huxley said in 19th century English, with its baked-in sexism, "It simply means that a man shall not say he knows or believes that which he has no scientific grounds for professing to know or believe." We already had the word ignorant, which means not knowing, and comes from the same root, gno, G-N-O, plus a prefix meaning not. Huxley coined this new word, mindful that there had been a group of people known as Gnostics. Gnosticism originated in the late 1st century CE among Jewish and early Christian sects. Gnostics emphasize personal spiritual knowledge, gnosis. Gnostics considered the principal element of salvation to be direct knowledge of the supreme divinity in the form of mystical or esoteric insight. Huxley wanted to repudiate that sort of claim to knowledge. Hence, he called himself agnostic. He wanted to distinguish a sort of good not knowing from bad not knowing. One shouldn't be merely ignorant. That's bad not knowing. But one should refrain from saying one knows or believes that for which one has no scientific grounds. In other words, do learn what can be learned, know what is knowable, and don't claim to know what isn't knowable. Don't even say you believe it if it isn't knowable. And thus, from its beginning, to claim the label agnostic was less about proclaiming what you don't know and more about making a point about what other people don't know. As Robert Ingersoll had noticed by 1890 when he wrote, "The agnostic does not simply say, 'I do not know.' He goes another step, and he says with great emphasis that you do not know." Or, as the humorist Harold Coffin ironically quipped in 1961, "The fellow who thinks he knows it all is especially annoying to those of us who do." Yeah. Huxley wasn't so agnostic when it came to claims about what other people don't know. I appreciate Huxley's caution against overclaiming, though his idea that we should believe only what we have scientific grounds for believing seems rather quaint. Our brains are built with all kinds of cognitive biases and shortcuts, and they need to be. And those shortcuts sometimes produce error, but we could not function in our world without an ability to make a quick best guess with the limited information available at the time. Huxley seems to have imagined 3 categories: things I know, things I don't know but might learn and then would know, and things that are unknowable and will never be known by anyone. Once we have recognized that we don't have certainty about anything, that even when we do have scientific grounds for a belief, science itself is constantly changing. Nothing is exempt from the possibility of revision. Then it's not possible to maintain a clear and definite distinction between things known and things not knowable. Rather, we find that the texture of our lives is composed of things guessed, with the guesses always in flux. So what is the point of being agnostic about the question, does God exist, if we are in fact agnostic about everything? And if we are agnostic about everything, how is that different from being ignorant of everything? I think we need to and can, and really for the most part have, set aside the notion that to know something means knowing it for certain as an unchanging, eternal truth. Think instead of knowing as doing. You know something when you are able to effectively use it to make your way in the world, to make coherent sense of things, or bring about desired results. So to have knowledge is not to have certain and unchanging truth, for the things we say and believe and remind ourselves and each other of that guide us in effective doing today may be replaced tomorrow with other more effective knowledge. With knowing as doing, then we Unitarian Universalists are not a people who don't know. We are neither agnostic nor ignorant. We act, and our actions' effectiveness is the embodiment of what we know. Our knowledge is displayed in all our doing, and our religious knowledge is manifest as our way of living in community with care and for justice. Unitarian Universalism, for Unitarian Universalism, what can I know for sure is not the central question. For us, the question is more like, what shall I be in the world? How shall I practice awareness and bring to the world compassion and wisdom? Our answers to these questions identifies our religion. And agnostic is not an answer to these questions. Our knowledge, tentative and revisable, is manifest as the way we answer those questions I asked earlier. What do you do to cultivate inner peace, equanimity, compassion, loving kindness, joy, and intuitive wisdom? What groups are you part of that encourage and teach that cultivation? What other ethics and values do you adhere to as supportive of your path? When and how have you experienced transcendence or oneness or interconnection, or glimpsed the intrinsic perfection of existence? What teachings do you study? Those are the key questions. And those questions aren't addressed by your answer to the question, does God exist? Whether that answer is yes, no, or I don't know. Let's take a break now, and when I come back, we'll see where we go from here. Let me share with you a Mary Oliver poem that I've shared before. The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? The grasshopper, I mean the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face, and now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Saying that God exists or doesn't, or you don't know, doesn't go very far to addressing the more crucial question. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? How to be agnostic is not the question today that it seemed to be for Thomas H. Huxley. It's not a matter of, as it was for him, of determining which of your beliefs were scientifically grounded and then dodging all other questions. Does God exist might actually be dodgeable, but what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life is not dodgeable, nor is it scientifically groundable. How will you cultivate inner peace, equanimity, compassion, loving kindness, joy, and intuitive wisdom? Shouldn't be dodged. There are steps to take, and that doing is our knowing. At the same time, the enduring invitation of agnosticism is to step into the space of not knowing, not doing for a while on some questions. This is not the agnosticism of, I don't know and you don't either, so stop annoying me with your beliefs. This is the agnosticism of openness, curiosity, receptivity, without an opinion on the matter, yet carefully considering the various views. The streak of agnosticism that runs through our Unitarian Universalist heritage continues to serve us well in that regard. That branch of our tradition helped train many of us to be tolerantly unopinionated about whether there was a God or an afterlife, and we are thus well positioned to bring that spirit to the changing social situation today. We face questions like, are you honoring or alienating people if you say Latinx instead of Latino? Some people are reclaiming and identifying as fat. So is it okay to describe someone that way? When and where and how often should a cisgender person declare by what pronouns she or he prefers to be referred to? Are straight people a supportive or annoying presence at pride events? Defund the police? Some of us have definite opinions on some of these questions. Many of us aren't so sure. Being agnostic on these questions is the right place to be until and unless we've heard more and maybe waited to see if more affected people have settled into a consensus. Again, not the Huxley-ish agnosticism of other people should stop believing certain things, but the agnosticism of open and receptive curiosity. Our tradition helps us be pretty good at that. Consider the question that was asked in an advice column called Race Manners. Someone wrote in with this question. One of the most common pieces of advice I've heard given to aspiring white allies is to seek out more Black opinions. This advice is often coupled with a further admonition to suspend one's own judgment and simply defer to Black people on matters of race and racism. However, Black Americans are a diverse group with a wide range of opinions on matters related to race and racism. If we ask Kimberly Crenshaw, Adolph Reed, John McWhorter, Angela Davis, and Tim Scott all to weigh in on Defund the Police, we'd get 5 different answers. What advice do you have for prospective and aspiring white allies about evaluating media from diverse sources and ultimately drawing their own conclusions? The columnist, Janae Desmond Harris, advised in part, I have had to accept that there won't be a single clear answer, and that I have to take responsibility for wherever I land on these questions. Here's what I think you should do. When you're thinking about this, start by replacing Black people want racism to stop playing such a big role in their lives, and I want to make sure I'm listening to the right ones so I can feel like a good ally, with I want racism to stop playing such a big role in all our lives, and I'll support things that I believe will make that happen. Even if you're not personally a victim of racism, you can and should still think of yourself as someone who has skin in the game. Should you weigh the perspectives of people who are personally affected by racist policies? Of course, but you don't have to weigh them all equally. Gather information and learn, yes, but as you're digesting all those tweets and articles and interviews, ask yourselves questions like these. Do I generally consider this person or media outlet to be smart and trustworthy? Do I see eye to eye with this person or media outlet on issues about which I feel more clear and confident? Does what I'm hearing line up with my values? While all Black people obviously have experience with racism, that's not the same thing as having studied, say, school integration. And having studied school integration won't make someone an expert on microaggressions. So go to the people with expertise. Your instinct to trust a group to advocate for themselves is right, so you should consider what most members of that group say they want. For example, a large majority of Black people are in favor of reparations, so it might make sense to defer to them. The question of police reform is a little trickier. Outside of the wide consensus that it is needed, there are varying views on how to get there. And the idea of defunding the police is an emerging policy proposal, not a divide based on decades of political difference. So that's where you need to do your research and decide what you think is effective policy to reach a shared goal of a less racist country. End quote. Some of us, again, do have definite opinions on these questions. What I want to say today is that if you don't, you're still in the right place. We Unitarian Universalists have a deep tradition of developing the skills of agnosticism, of not blindly accepting any authority to establish orthodoxy for us, of considering other points of view. Janae Desmond Harris began her answer to the question by saying, I can't issue get out of racism free passes, or get out of being scolded by Black people on Twitter passes, or guaranteed to be on the right side of history passes. When I read that, it was reminding of me, it reminded me of our agnostic tradition of thoughtful people who pointed out that Christian doctrine didn't give us a get into heaven free pass. Our Unitarian forebears wrestled with questions of Christian doctrine, and we today are called to wrestle with questions of social justice doctrine. Our forebears made some mistakes. I think they misstepped when they used agnosticism to try to dodge not just the question of God's existence, but to dodge all questions about spiritual development. And we would be making a similar misstep if we threw up our hands and declared these social justice questions to be unknowable. And if we tried to dodge them or let somebody, or we would also be misstepping if we tried to dodge those questions, or if we let somebody else do the work. What Unitarian agnostics have long understood is there is no answer that will give you a free pass. And it's okay to take your time in forming some answer. Our knowledge is in our doing, and our doing is always under revision. There are questions here that ultimately cannot be dodged, and with no answer that ultimately can be certified. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What is it that will reduce the role racism is playing in all our lives? These questions require all the attentive love that we have. May it be so. Amen.
Our closing hymn is number 1031, Filled with Loving Kindness. Please sing along with Michael Tacey and choir.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Thank you for being with us. Be safe. Be well. Now, please join Joe Majak for our chalice extinguishing words as you extinguish your chalice at home.
Please say with me these words as we extinguish our chalices. The flame is now ours to carry. The encouraging fire of spiritual growth, the warmth of acceptance, the light of love. These abide in our hearts, in our words, and in the work of our hands.
And now, may you leave this place knowing that you are good and you are loved.
Take your light and your life from this place. Use it to bless the world.
And stay safe until we meet again.
Go in peace and love.